Welcome back here to GG Speedruns. We have our third match of our quadruple header. Things being shifted around ever so slightly. We have Prince Leaf taking on MrEntity. Prince Leaf, the 4 seed in the tournament. MrEntity, the 29 seed. Prince Leaf also 4th on the leaderboard with a 5:32 PB. MrEntity, at least listed on the Smash TV leaderboard, has a 944.
That 944, I can attest, is not at all accurate for Ron.
I didn't think so. I was
Yeah.
like, no. I'm pretty sure Entity's done considerably better than that.
He definitely has times in the mid-7 ranges at the very least. So, but he hasn't streamed this game since the last tournament, so it'll be pretty interesting to see what he's able to bust out for us here. Having a little trouble finishing off the first room here is MrEntity, but I don't know if he's actually done any warming up beforehand. Prince Leaf, of course, as you mentioned, is the number 4 time on the leaderboard, so another veteran of the game is going to make use of these first grenades. Ferran, sometimes it's better to just grab everything in sight and hope you get those rockets or that orb early.
Yeah, there's definitely an entity, no pun intended, of trying to chase for a desirable drop.
No orb yet for Leaf, but some quick, good shooting is going to get him out of collect power-ups at a 119. Entity has an orb and is just shredding everything in sight. Orb coming a little late for him, but he shouldn't be too far behind. Just needs to take care of these shrapnels, and it'll be about a 134. So a 15-second lead for Prince Leaf in the early going here.
And the rockets now for Leaf going to just mow through pretty much everything here.
Yeah, it'd be really nice for Leaf to get an orb in this room before Total Carnage. That's where you really want the orbs. It can show up in this room, of course, so you'd rather have it earlier than later. Entity getting pushed around a little bit by the swarmers, but has the shrapnels firmly under control here inside Eat My Shrapnel. We got a first drop nuke for Leaf. He's going to take that and just get rid of all those shrapnels at the start of the room. Now a razor shield for Leaf. That will definitely help him control the center. Now all he needs is an orb or some weapons.
Well, 219 into Total Carnage now for MrEntity. Still doing everything he can to hang on to that orb, but man, there's a lot coming his way.
And what really didn't help him, Ferran, is that grenade showing up in the middle of the arena, not a room where you want to have grenades. Finally, an orb for Prince Leaf. Entity, with a cautious grab of that spreader, did not want to walk into the mine and lose his life and the orb.
That would have been a huge loss for sure. Leaf mowing down what looks to be the end of the room here, and is going to be into the bonus prizes room at about 308, 309.
Very respectable entry. Entity, unfortunately, losing his orb going for the razor shield. The game has mercy, though, and gives him a replacement here to finish things off inside Total Carnage. One of the shrapnels explodes on MrEntity, but luckily he was busy shooting at the other one, so not much of a time loss. 332 entry for MrEntity. He's a full bonus room behind Leaf at the moment, but
rockets as well.
Yeah, that is the god drop in Tank Trouble. You want rockets, 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 and nothing else if you can help it. With those gunners out of the way, Leaf doing an admirable job of staying in the center, and now more rockets for Leaf to help him out here. He loses the orb, however. That might be a blessing in disguise if the rockets keep coming. You don't need to be shooting 2 of them all the time. That'll run through the ammo a little faster. But invulnerability and then a nuke but that is going to finish the room. A 4:16 entry for Prince Leaf. Pretty good time for On.
Yeah, I mean, it's no task run, but yeah, it's all right.
Well, the task was done 7
No, I know.
seconds ago, so that's an unfair
I
comparison.
said that tongue-in-cheek. That was totally meant to be tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, of course. Leaf not
Lobber
quite able to get the second gunner out with those grenades, so it's going to have to worry a little bit about fire. Nope, takes a break to just get rid of them with his lobber. Entity finally about to finish off Tank Trouble here. Tank Trouble lives up to its names for a lot of our more inexperienced runners there. Entity with some pretty decent drops there did manage to keep an orb for most of it, had a razor shield, but no rockets, and rockets are what you want in that room. Entity opens with a key as Leaf pops the second arm with a lobber, now the chest, and gets some more ammo.
Entity tried to go for the orb damage on Mutoid Man, just missed by a little bit. There is a spreader. Going to be a little too late to take a death for it here. Go get it. Oh.
Spread. I think Entity would be happier to just keep using the lobber. The spreader wasn't in the greatest position there. Entity trying to tiptoe in does get that lobber. Really good pickup there. Might be too little too late as the head popped for Prince Leaf. So Prince Leaf with about a 3-form advantage over Mr. Entity right now.
And Mr. Entity is probably awaiting a drop that is being sat on by Mutoid Man, because that's what he does.
Entity going to take a death, maybe hoping that it's a spreader, and it is! The gamble pays off. That will get Mr. Entity back in this. Another spreader, but the invulnerability runs out. Leaf takes a death. Match very much still under Leaf's control, but Entity making a heroic attempt here, but it's going to fall short. Leaf is going to take game number 1. But if we are assuming Mr. Entity's PB is 944, I guarantee we are seeing a PB right now for On.
Absolutely.
Entity working that lobber in the corner, trying to bank the shots off the wall. Mutoid Man being a little impolite with where he was parking himself there, kind of putting himself in that no man's land where it's hard to hit him with the lobber no matter what you do.
Less than desirable, trying to creep in and, gets the grenade, but also runs into the mine. And there's a lobber spawn, which is probably what he was looking for.
Yeah, Mr. Entity liking the cardinal direction lobber fire here. Had an opportunity to fire it diagonal, but at this point, perhaps knowing that the race is over, just wants to play it safe and get this thing done. Still going to be a pretty respectable time, about a 7:41 for Mr. Entity here. Leaf is going to take game 1 by a little over a minute here. So, 1-0 for Leaf, but it's a best of 5. We'll see if Mr. Entity can turn this thing around and steal a game or two along the way.
Crazier things certainly have happened.
All right, as they both do their respective manipulations to get that guaranteed Razor Shield drop in the first room, I'm just going to check with them and give them the countdown. In the meantime, for On, we do have another race tonight. Do you want to... Well, hopefully we have another race tonight. We've been having difficulty contacting one of the participants, at least, but feel free to hype that up while I get them started up here.
Absolutely. Scheduled to be following this matchup is the last of our opening round matches. It'll be the number 15 seed Ares Fire Tiger taking on the 18 seed Seawalker 777. And then, we've already gotten one of the bonus bracket matches out of the way, but there's still quite a few more matches yet to be scheduled over the course of the upcoming week. Same thing with the winners round, as well, as most of those matchups have already been determined. And we have the countdown underway, so we'll get into those coming up here. As Game number 2 in this best of 5 between Prince Leaf and MrEntity is underway.
Yep, here we go with game number 2. Leaf taking the first one pretty comfortably by about a minute or so. Both of them getting their Razor Shield drop here early on. Leaf electing to hang out towards the topmost door, not a strategy you see very often. Entity, meanwhile, just running all over the place, using that Razor Shield like a battering ram. It's going to be about a 40-second exit for Leaf and a 41 for Entity, so pretty close after one room here.
Yeah, not too shabby, all things considered. And some kind of early empty drops. A spreader, meanwhile, for Entity. And the grenades now for Leaf. So Leaf trying to do a lot with a little, and, well, that little pays off as rockets and an orb.
Sometimes you can do a lot with a little, Ferran, and Leaf, very heads up, hanging on to that single rocket for as long as possible before getting the orb to just maximize how many rockets he could blam at those doors. Entity, again, playing very aggressively with his late Razor Shield. He's going to be out of the room at about a 129, so about a 5-second difference right now. Still fairly close.
Absolutely.
Some rockets for Leaf means that the initial barrage at the start of the room is no problem. Both of our runners with an orb, and from what we've seen in game number 1, neither of them should have any issue clearing this room out with the orb in tow. Entity, unfortunately, picking up a nuke is going to lose about 3 seconds as a result of that. Stops the spawns. You kind of don't want that in a room where you just need everything to get in the room as quickly as possible. Leaf controlling the center of total carnage pretty good here in the early going. Dodges a few shrapnels. Good concentrated fire. Entity also with the orb. Trying to stay in the center. Maybe moving a little too erratically, but nothing getting close to him. Dodges a bunch of shrapnel. Blocks one with the orb. You love seeing that, even if it was perhaps not completely intentional. Dodges a bullet there, keeps his orb. Not sure how he managed that, but with the rockets, you can see Entity being a little more deliberate with his fire, trying to maximize their usage there. Razor Shield for Prince Leaf, so he's comfortably in control of the room here.
Yeah, comfortable control of the room, not easy to get, at least when you're at a level kind of like myself for MrEntity.
Yeah, MrEntity again making good use of his rockets here. Leaf first into the bonus room at about a 312. Entity just, again, using his Razor Shield extremely aggressively at the end of the room here. He's going to elect to pick up the spreader before going into the bonus room. So, nice clip of weapon to take in with the orb into total carnage. But about a 12-second difference, if I'm looking at the timers correctly right now, Ferran.
Yeah, and not something that is insurmountable. All it takes is a couple of drops or a death in this case here as Leaf picks up the replacement orb. What a nice little bit of dancing here.
Yeah, hard to get into the middle. Bullets everywhere, swarmers everywhere. Leaf loses another orb. Entity making good use of that spreader to clear some space. Picks up the rockets. This should get rid of the gunners, and it does. Fights his way back to the middle, loses the orb, unfortunately. Leaf still with his orb in tow, fighting desperately to stay in the middle. Has to get rid of that tank, and does.
Spreaders as well with the orb. And Entity trying to get down to where those rockets are, and does.
Yeah, he makes it in, just cutting himself a path with his fire. Not in the greatest spot here, kind of pinned in the corner, at least is able to get rid of the tank. Runs out before the second tank comes on there. Entity, again, having some trouble here in tank trouble. As noted, that's a room where experience really comes into play. Leaf gets teased by a spreader, but Mutoid parks on it. Leaf able to pick it up. Looks like he's getting a little bit of manual damage in here. Empty drop the key. One arm pops. Leafs get shot just as an invulnerability appears with half of the spreader clip left. Very unfortunate for Ron. But some good spreader fire is going to give him a little bit of cushion here as Mr. E enters tank trouble. So right now, MrEntity, a form and change behind, is going to need some good weapon drops to catch up to Leaf here. Leaf pops another arm. No gunners to worry about. Entity still has his 2 gunners there, but looks like he's trying to focus on dealing damage right now, perhaps knowing he's a little bit behind here. A great spreader from Leaf is going to put him on to popping the chest. Head popped for Leaf here. Nothing but great weapons for Leaf, and Entity again just getting nothing but grenades. A decent DPS weapon, but early on in the fight, much better options available here. There's a spreader for Leaf, but way too far on the other side to get it, and Mutoid just parking on it because why not at that point? Final form now for Leaf. With grenades in tow, that should get some damage in there. Grenades again for MrEntity. It's too early in the fight for those. So 3-form lead right now for Leaf. This next lobber clip could do it, folks, and seal game number 2.
This more than likely will, and it does.
It does indeed, Ferran. Game number 2 gonna go to Leaf. Leaf gonna finish this with about a 651.
Stop the timer a little late, but still about a 650, 651, as you had said. And MrEntity just looking to...
MrEntity looking to get a weapon that can actually deal some damage to the early forms of Mutoid here. I don't think he meant to get those rockets. I think he was trying to set himself up for those horizontal or vertical lobber shots that he seems to really like there. Working the diagonal a little bit this time. And yet another empty drop. Mutoid Man not playing nice for MrEntity tonight. But all that said, Leaf has played exceptionally well so far in these first 2 games for On.
Yeah, no, certainly not. Now the RNG is just being rather trolly here for Entity. But no, he's definitely held his own. And of course, now there's a spreader after a death, because the game knows. Yeah,
the game knows. Spreader after a death. On the final form where you can't get bonus damage. The RNG is just mocking MrEntity at this point.
Oh, and
this is going to be an over 8-minute run. An over 3-minute Mutoid Man fight. Just really terrible drops. And it's not like MrEntity needed the terrible drops to lose this race, as Leaf was about a half-minute ahead entering the boss room.
Yeah, it's adding injury to insult or insult to injury, however you want to look at it.
But that seems to have been the theme with tonight's matches, Ferran. The higher-seeded players getting the far better end of the drop spectrum, be it earlier in the arena or in the boss room itself.
Yeah, to quote our lead commentator, LOZ Cards Fan 23, RNG has definitely favored the favorites tonight.
It certainly has, and we might be looking at another 3-0 match here tonight. Unless the drops change drastically. Leaf definitely has a significant edge on experience coming to this game here. But I'm going to check with our runners if they're ready for game number 3. We're going to get that underway momentarily.
Now, of note, the winner of this matchup will advance into the winner's second round and take on the 20-seeded Oopla. Oopla pulled off victory over the 13-seeded Scotty, 3-1. The loser of this will fall into the bonus bracket and will take on Scotty. And the winner of that matchup will face the whomever loses between the 10-seeded E.T. Goham and the 7-seeded Jackamus.
I've given them the countdown for on. They should be underway here momentarily.
All right, so game 3. Will Leaf get the sweep, or will Entity force a game 4? I'm hoping for the game 4, but that's because I like seeing lots of matchups.
Absolutely, Ferran. I'm hoping for the game 4 myself. But if Entity is gonna push this thing to 4 games, he's gonna need much better drops than he's gotten in the first 2 races so far. And Leaf definitely has handled tank trouble much better than MrEntity. They've been pretty close up to about that point where Leaf just takes off and never looks back.
Yep, into collect power-ups already. Entity a couple of seconds behind.
See what that all-important first drop is. For Leaf, it's an invulnerability, but followed by rockets. Rockets for MrEntity, followed by an invulnerability, so the opposite order.
And more rockets now for Entity. And an orb for Prince Leaf.
Yeah, Entity needs to be a little more concise with his movement in the center. A lot of those swarmers kind of getting off the standard 4 cardinal directions path to the center of the room. But really good rocket fire by Leaf is going to get him out of the room at about a 121. Entity not going to be too far behind, maybe a little early on the smart bomb, just by 1 swarmer though. So about a 6-second lead for Prince Leaf.
Oh, and there's the swirl for MrEntity. Utilizes the nuke, which I believe cuts into a little bit or adds a little bit of time to the room, if I recall correctly, like a 1.5 seconds.
It does, Ferran, because it stops the traps from spawning in while it's active. But in a situation where you only have grenades and no orb, maybe not a terrible play to at least get the room under control. In this case, MrEntity's next drop was an orb. Unfortunately loses it, but with rockets in tow, he can at least keep the Shrappies under control here. Leaf doing some good work in the center here with his orb. Very tight, small movements. That's what you want in the center of the room. Really don't get out of those 4 triangles that you see in the middle unless you need to dodge something. Just move a little bit just to spread out the angle of your orb's fire to make sure you're covering the whole door that you're shooting at. Orb, rockets, and now a razor shield for MrEntity, getting the dream set up here early on in Total Carnage.
There's a nuke on the left, gonna avoid it. Probably the wise move there, is you don't want to get out of the center. Now that one, that's a little bit, yeah, there you go. That's one to pick up there for sure.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a defensible orb pickup. And look at this, Leaf out of the room at a 301. Very, very good entry into the bonus room for Leaf.
Oh, goodness. Some grenades at the feet.
And quick message there. All Smash TV players should quit now and flee from this machine. Again, we do like to remind our runners to disable your alerts and etc. for these tournament matches. Entity unfortunately losing his orb at the very end of Total Carnage. First drop Razor Shield for Leaf means he can focus on the gunners and get rid of those, the shield protecting him from the swarmers. And now set up quite nicely, his Razor Shield holding pretty well, still 4 pieces left after that barrage it took early on in the room.
Which means some accurate firepower to keep those enemies from bumping in. And
first drop grenades for Entity. He's going to play dangerous in the corner, but does get rid of one of the gunners. Next drop's a spreader. He gets the gunner, but the gunner gets him too. And Leaf making mincemeat out of Total Carnage is going to be into the boss room at a 4:15 for Ron. Sub 6 potentially incoming.
And Entity getting clubbed down again here. This is a tough room.
Entity with lots of rockets there, but just too much fire his way. Loses the whole clip. You hate to see that. There's a good spreader for Leaf, but electing not to take the death for Ron.
Well, it looks like Leaf playing on the player 2 side. I didn't see where it initially came up, so I don't know if it was in that ideal situation, or he would have had to go across the room for it. So that's probably why.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Leaf, another fan of the player 2 strats there. So I'm so used to seeing everyone play player 1 except myself. But yeah, I can totally understand why Leaf wouldn't go for the death in that case.
Yeah, ideal for a player 1 setup, but as a player 2, you can see with the red sprite, they make their way from the right side of the screen as opposed to the left.
Exactly. Entity not able to get that first weapon, gets a spreader with an invulnerability though. And then again, you see the slight inexperience of newer players. They see that invulnerability go red and they like to pull away just maybe a little early out of concern for their safety. But it is the red phase does last about 2 seconds. So with some experience, you can know exactly how much time you have left in your invincibility as the head pops here for Prince Leaf. First arm down for Entity. Leaf gets tagged by a shrapnel, but moves on to the final form and gets to use a lobber. Entity doing some work with lobbers and gets zapped. Grenades for Leaf. This should do it for Ron. If not, this next one certainly will.
And there it is. So that's going to be about a 620, 623?
625, I think. Difference, 624. So good job to Prince Leaf. Prince Leaf's going to take our third match of the night, 3-0 here. MrEntity, maybe perhaps regretting not updating his PB before the tournament. We can see from how he's played, he's definitely a little underseeded in this thing. But with a recorded PB of 944 at the start, that's not going to get you a good seed, and you might run into a extremely high-level player, as MrEntity did tonight.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in this case here, and I don't know, maybe it would have, it's hard to say how it would have gone if there was a different PB, I guess, unless we hop in the DeLorean, we'll never know.
And I guess we will never know, but it is a double elimination tournament here. I think if MrEntity cleans up his tank trouble, he could be fairly competitive in this. That is definitely the room costing him the most time from what we've seen in the 3 games tonight.
It has been problematic, and, well, the head popped off, and again, Entity not very comfortable with the spreader strats.
That one a little far away from the player 1 door spawn, but if he walked into a mine right away, he would have gotten there. Mutoid, I was going to say, being quite cooperative with that dangerous placement on MrEntity got himself into with those grenades, but then immediately gets run over. But this lobber should finish Mutoid Man off, and MrEntity, unfortunately, is going to be defeated by Prince Leaf tonight, 3-0. But, if he works on that tank trouble, I mean, he should be able to consistently get low 7 runs and could maybe steal a match or 2 in the bottom half of the bracket.
Well, he's got an interesting matchup ahead against the 13-seeded Scotty, so we will certainly see how that goes.
Yes, we will, Ferran, but this is Game 3 in the books. Stick around, folks. We have one more match tonight between Ares Fire Tiger and Seawalker 777s. That'll be coming your way in just the next few minutes.